Hi, so I'm back and look at what I've got my hands on. Oh, yes, the book that I talked about in the episode where I was talking about quote Beard's handpicked books. So this one is The Miracle of Castel di Sanrio, and I just got my hands on it, so I'm gonna take some time and read through it and come up with my thoughts on it. But I'm glad that I found it, and well, yes, the episodes have been out. I hope everybody's been watching. It's a lovely journey on the Ted Lasso recent episodes. But I picked up this book sometime back, and the book I'm going to talk about today is called Chutzpah: Why Israel is a Hub of Innovation and Entrepreneurship by Inbal Arieli. Chutzpah. You might have heard of the word, maybe not that often, but in very different contexts, and that is precisely what this book is about. It uses it in the backdrop of one particular country and culture, but in very different contexts. So my take currently is that it's almost like a handbook, and I'm going to talk about it. So it's almost like a handbook on parenting, self-help, management, military practices, and whatnot. I mean, it's almost like something that can be applied in almost all aspects of life. So it's a good good thing. Good lessons can be taken away from this book to be utilized in one's own life. In fact, if you just go through the contents of this particular book, you tend to form a structure of where all can this be useful and what all are the things that are important in life where you can have a slightly different approach. So anyways, without digressing much, let me start with what this book in my mind is and what I've taken away from it. The word chutzpah is courage, audacity. It can be many different things, but in this context, let's stick to something like determination and optimism. Right now, optimism about any aspect of life. It's not just about your work. It's not just about entrepreneurship, right? It can be into many facets of life. Now, there are certain facts and figures which this book mentions and which hold true, that Israel happens to be the world's leading innovation ground. For the lack of its resources, infrastructure, or the geopolitical tensions that it is mired in and it's surrounded by or has within itself, the fact that Israel has turned out to be an innovation and entrepreneurial hub is itself quite commendable. And in particular, this book talks about how right from the childhood our kids are exposed to a different style of parenting, culture, and surroundings, and within which they take on themselves a different journey, a different way of growing up. And those influences are something that are the source of the difference in the whole idea that Israel has turned out to be an innovation hub. So that's something that the author explores and expounds on in detail. And there are a lot of terms that are specific to the language and culture from Israel, which have philosophical meanings to them that the author shares in this particular book. And those are the terms which are a little difficult to pronounce for me, and but the gist of the the philosophical meanings behind those ideas and notions are something very handy and very useful. So the author talks about, as I said, the childhood, the way the children play around, and the education system, their community and the tribe-like surrounding environment, their dedication in service and military, the idea around it, why, how, and how kids make use of the limited resources and yet create something suitable, useful, handy, and all sorts of things. So, when we talk about tribe-like community, it is not about looking out for each other per se. Instead, this book and the author talks about real independence. How would you let the kids develop the sense of exploring the world without fear or restraint? Typically the idea of parenting is to stop the children from getting hurt. But this book talks about an approach whereby people are not risk averse as such. The whole culture is not risk averse. They encourage kids to take risks with a lot of not with a lot of supervision per se, but yes, it's all ascertained and assessed risk that we're talking about. It's not careless and reckless risk, and we're not talking about parenting which can go bizarre. So it's a very tried and tested method with them, and that's what the author talks about. So no judgment over there. They talk about the fact that builds resiliency and willingness to take or accept mistakes. The kids learn to be in the moment, think about the situation, develop flexibility, accommodate surprises, and that kind of helps them organize or get used to organizing chaos better suited than others. In fact, they had a German teacher who, instead of bringing expensive toys to the classroom and the school, would encourage children to bring some junk, some junk, broken items from home or somewhere, and then create a whole junkyard and encourage kids to make something out of it. And it really took off. That's what the author talks about. That whole idea took off as a philosophy of education, that kids become extremely active and focused how to manipulate different broken items and find solutions to make their own toys, make their own handicraft items and things like that. Now that is something that is not bound by guidelines of this is right, this is wrong, putting them into a specific mold or idea of the way one would think and impose it onto the kid. Instead, they gain perspectives on what is the cause of something working out, or the effect of something not working out or working out. You know what I mean? So that's something interesting that the author talks about, that they gain their own perspectives, and that's what we all do even in adult life when we grow up and we become autodidacts. So that's basically what we're doing. We're still learning, but we're learning essentially on our own. If you just think about the cumulative effect of that training years back, that's what I was thinking. If this is something I knew way back, yes, there would have been slower, I don't know, I mean, maybe slower growth, maybe not. Maybe it would have been a really creative brain instead of a very rote learning trained brain. I don't know if I'm putting that correctly. But it did make sense to me that the kids would gain their own perspectives with making their own solutions and toys, rather than giving them certain toys and they have a very limited play with them. So that's something. Another thing to talk about is letting kids trust their own safety. If we let them trust their own safety, they will trust their own safety. And that's a very strong message that we're talking about here. Most of the times and if you see, I've seen this video, I'm not sure if most of you have or not, but it's only when the parents react to a kid falling that the kid starts to cry. I mean, unless obviously severely hurt. So somewhere our reaction is what the kid is thriving on. Now, if you entrust the safety to the kid would just probably get up and just start walking, thinking that, okay, it was not such a big deal. That's another thing that it talks about. It talks about freedom, and the true freedom of expression and comfort with surroundings and surroundings, environment, unpredictable set of items, paraphernalia, situations, and it all molds them into this mindset where they're open to surprise and something they were not anticipating. Because as the author puts it very correctly, that order is a fragile concept. You have order, but it's so easy to be destroyed by any slight change in the anticipated rules and regulations around it. Yeah, that, let's say X is supposed to happen, and then you're just anticipating X, but then Y happens. So order is a very flimsy sort of a thing. We think we have a lot of order until we realize we don't. They say that a lot of best laid plans go awry. Now, if that be the case, so you need people who are so trained mentally, to handle stress. In fact, they do talk about a concept. I'll have to find out what was that. They do talk about a concept whereby the whole community trained mindset of accepting failure as something, as an opportunity to learn, rather than something that judges you as a failure, makes people be better trained mentally and physically to handle stress. To handle those chemical imbalances that happen in our minds when we are hit with a failure. We go down and out, knocked down, and we all know. I mean, it's not about how hard can you punch, but how hard can you get punched and keep walking, as Mr. Sylvester Stallone said in Rocky. So I think it's about that, and it does make sense. It talks about the idea of living in the moment and flowing with it. Anticipate less, be prepared to adjust more, and that's actually what life is. Anyway, let me see what else did I have jotted down as talking points. I think we've covered pretty much a lot about it. Well, they do talk about the intellectual excellence as a way of life. It talks about worrying about failure is just something that creates anxiety and frustration, and it makes you unknowingly start distrusting your cognitive abilities to adapt and adjust and come up with solutions. So that's something that can be trained, and you would have read, and I've read a couple of books myself, whereby there is a lot of self-help guidance on how you can train your mind to different ideas and situations, and open to uh, behaving in a certain manner or not in a certain manner. So yeah, another thing that it talks about it, what this does, this whole process, what it does is, if you're going by traditional methodology of teaching, now by the time you complete your third or fourth year of education, it might just be outdated if you look at the speed with which we are going in terms of the technical innovation and development. So if that's how we go, or we stick to that process, then we're basically teaching kids to learn to deal with problems that exist essentially. But what about the problems that don't exist, that would only come in future, and that might just create a lot of anxiety, that, oh my god, this is the question I've not seen. Now that is something that the education system in most of the countries need to adapt to, that so that kids become autodidacts and they adapt and construct their own solutions to the unforeseen situations and problems that arise. There's also something on community service in disadvantaged areas, which brings children into an adulthood sort of a mindset, and they are encouraged to take responsibilities and initiatives. Basically, that's what it drives into them. In fact, a lot of their military service is about that, and they encourage the military service to be in and around the area where they live, so that it develops a bond to in the soldiers and in the personnel towards their own land. It's about protecting your own land, your own family, your own culture. So this is something different from, let's say, in the US, where the military personnel are deployed, and then we've seen a lot of reports and movies and shows where they show the struggles of reintegrating them back into the society. This takes care of that as well, because the idea of community service makes them feel that they're just protecting their land. It's not a job per se they're going and doing. It's an idea that they are protecting. So that's the difference in their approach, and versus the approach in a traditional or rule oriented society that they have, right? Yeah, the others have. So in a rule oriented society, you're bound to think of things as job or a burden or an anxiety creating work or a task, whereas in this case you'd be invested in it, you know. So I think that's the difference they talk about. They talk about a military capital, which is an aggregate sum of human capital, um, social capital, cultural capital, not just your gunpowder and your manpower. So that's the key difference over here. In fact, the author talks about the Air Force. Air Force is most of their services have a very flat hierarchical structure, so that everybody is involved and driven to participate and improve the process. In fact, this is one of the most important terms that they use. So it's called Dugri, Dugri. It's in fact a way of expressing oneself that is honest to the point that it is unpleasant. Can you imagine? Because, and they use it in military extensively, Air Force military, so that the events or the processes are analyzed and debated upon, and the key takeaways are improved upon, refined upon. That's why the Israeli military is supposed to be one of the best. In fact, the IAF, as the author says, has a ruthlessly candid briefing culture. There is no space for ego. There is no accommodation of ego, and improvement means everything for them. Hence the result. Debate on that. So that's what this book is talking about. It's talking about optimism. It's talking about courage and determination, and making it your second nature as a matter of persistence, so that you don't take it too hard, you don't get knocked down and bogged down, and in fact you keep finding ways and solutions and adapt. Once you find that mindset, and it's all about mindset, we all know that. A mindset to repair the world, that's another term, repairing the world, so that you improve it, you contribute to improve rather than becoming a liability on the world and the whole system. And so that you're not fragile, you are anti-fragile, you are strong enough to adapt. And then when you bring all those things as a grown individual into, let's say, entrepreneurial domain of innovation, disruption, creativity, the results are in front of us. Israel ended up becoming the innovation hub. So that's essentially all that this book is talking about. The terms are pretty interesting. They always are. The foreign terms and words are always interesting. They're very difficult to learn and pronounce, but they have deep meaning, deep philosophical meanings, certain ideas and notions for which, let's say, in English we don't even have a word. So it's good to have those. If somebody can learn them, good for them. I have clearly been struggling. That's why I had to keep referring back to my notes. There's just so much. This is one thing which I realized, that there's just so much philosophical and okay. There's something called information. There's something called knowledge, and then there's something called wisdom. These ideas, they have wisdom. There's wisdom wrapped in them. 4 words or a one-word phrase or one-word term would have an entire philosophy behind it. That's something that really interests me a lot, and I really wish I could learn these words. I'm still kind of adapting to this idea and finding where I can implement it in my life. Certainly can be. There's always a scope of great improvement that one can bring to one's own life. This particular book does provide that different approach that can be put to learning, and we all are learning. I hope. I definitely am. And how to improve, how to become adaptive to different situations, and rather than getting bogged down. Anyway, so that's that. And as I said, I've been lucky enough to get my hands on this book, The Miracle of Castel di Sanrio. Soon it'll be coming on one of the videos that I'll share. Until then, Chutzpah. Please utilize this philosophy, read about it if you can, and enjoy your enriched lives, I would say, right? That's all we are here to do. So have a good one, guys, and see you soon.